The emergency room at Toronto General doesn't sleep. Neither did Mara Callahan, not really, not in 3 years of night shifts, watching people arrive broken and leave either fixed or not. She was restocking the trauma bay supply cart at 11:47 p.m. when she heard the commotion in the main corridor. Not the usual commotion: drunks, overdoses, domestic disputes bleeding into the hallways. This was different. This was the sound of people moving out of the way of something that didn't ask them to. 6 men in dark clothing came through the automatic doors like a weather system. They moved in formation, tight and purposeful, and in the center of them, barely conscious and bleeding through a white dress shirt, was a man who looked like he had been designed by someone with very strong opinions about what danger was supposed to look like. The lead guard reached the triage desk before the doors had finished closing. "Vincent Caruso, he needs a trauma team now." Mara looked up from the cart. She knew the name. Everyone in Toronto who read anything beyond the weather knew the name. Vincent Caruso. The Caruso family. Real estate, shipping, hospitality, and the kind of backroom influence that made city councillors sweat at breakfast. The man being half-carried to the nearest bay didn't look like the photographs in the papers. He looked younger and considerably more shot. "What's the injury?" Mara asked, pulling on gloves and already moving toward him. He was grazed. Twice. The guard's voice was flat, professional. Left side and right shoulder. "He refused the ambulance." "Of course he did." Mara pulled back the shirt where the guard had already cut it open. Deep furrow along the rib cage, still bleeding. Shoulder graze, messier but less serious. "How long ago?" 40 minutes. He's been bleeding for 40 minutes because he refused the ambulance." "Yes." Mara looked at Vincent Caruso. He was conscious, his jaw clenched, looking at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had decided pain was a personal inconvenience rather than a medical reality. "Mr. Caruso." She leaned into his sightline. His eyes moved to her face. Dark, sharp, still tracking despite the blood loss. "I don't need stitches," he said. His voice was rougher than she expected. "Just pack it. I have somewhere to be." "You have somewhere to be," Mara repeated. "That's what I said." Mara set down the gauze she was holding. She looked at the guard. Then she looked back at Vincent Caruso, who was bleeding steadily onto a hospital gurney, and had apparently decided that his schedule was more urgent than his circulatory system. "Mr. Caruso, your left side is a serious laceration. If the bleeding doesn't stop, and it won't on its own, not with the depth of this, you'll be back here in 2 hours by ambulance and unconscious, and then you won't have anywhere to be for a considerable amount of time." She picked the gauze back up. "So you can either let me do my job, or you can leave and come back later in worse condition. But I'm not packing a wound this size for someone who's going to rip it open, walking to his car." The guard looked like he had swallowed something uncomfortable. Vincent Caruso looked at Mara. The silence lasted long enough that 2 nurses at the station behind her stopped pretending to look at their screens. "Fine," he said. Mara had worked the ER long enough to have stitched up people she recognized from the news, from crime reports, from the kind of conversations that happened in hushed voices in hospital corridors. She did not ask questions beyond clinical necessity. That was the job. That was always the job. But Vincent Caruso watched her the entire time she worked, in a way that most patients didn't. Not with hostility. Not with the uncomfortable attention of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted from women, with assessment. Like she was a problem he was trying to solve the equation for. "You're not afraid of me," he said, about 20 minutes in. "I'm afraid of plenty of things," Mara said, tying off a suture. "You're not currently one of them. You're currently a laceration." Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, something more involuntary than that. "How long have you on nights?" "Before that, 2 years at St. Michael's." She cut the suture thread, left shoulder next. "This one's easier. Your hands don't shake. They do at home sometimes. Not here." She moved to his shoulder. "Does this hurt?" "Yes, good. Means the nerve endings are intact." She worked efficiently, not gently, but not carelessly either. "You need to keep both sides dry for 72 hours and come back to have the sutures checked in a week. Don't let whoever you have do it instead. They'll pull too hard or not hard enough. How do you know I have someone?" Mara glanced at the 6 men stationed at various points around the trauma bay, 2 of whom had physically redirected a confused orderly who had wandered too close. "Educated guess," she said. He almost smiled again. "Almost." She finished. She wrote the aftercare instructions herself, handed them to him directly rather than to the guard who reached for them, and stepped back. "You're clear to go," she said, carefully. Vincent Caruso sat up. He moved like a man who had experienced pain before and had negotiated a long-standing truce with it. He looked at the aftercare sheet, then at her. "Mara Callahan," he read from her badge. "Thank you. It's my job. Most people who do their job for me," he said, pulling the ruins of his shirt closed with more dignity than should have been possible. Don't talk to me like that while they're doing it. Like what? Like I'm a person who needs correcting. Mara pulled off her gloves. You were a person who needed correcting. You were going to leave a wound that size open. He stood. He was taller than he looked lying down. He looked at her for another moment. That same careful, calibrating assessment. Then he left. Mara watched the formation move back through the corridor and out the automatic doors, and then she went back to the supply cart. Was that? The nurse behind the station started. Yes, Mara said. Did you just tell Vincent Caruso he needed correcting? I told him his wound needed proper closure. She logged the supplies, which it did. The knock on her apartment door came 11 days later, which was 4 days after she'd confirmed at the follow-up visit that the sutures were healing cleanly, and he could return to whatever it was that Vincent Caruso returned to after getting shot twice. She opened it with the chain on, because she lived alone in the annex in a building that had seen better decades, and it was 8 in the morning after a night shift, and she was still wearing her coat. There were 2 men in the hallway, not 6 this time. One was the guard who had spoken at the hospital. The other was a man she had never seen, with the kind of stillness that didn't come from calm. It came from practice. Miss Callahan. The familiar guard held an envelope. Mr. Caruso would like to speak with you. He has my phone number. It's on the patient file. He'd prefer in person. Mara looked at the envelope. She looked at the 2 men. She thought about the suture line on his ribs, whether it had held, whether whoever he'd had look at it had done it properly. She thought about the 3 months of back rent on this apartment. She thought about her younger brother Jamie, 23 years old, and currently in a rented room in Scarborough, working 2 jobs to make payments on a debt their father had left behind when he died. A debt to people who did not issue formal payment schedules. She undid the chain. The Caruso building on Bay Street had a lobby that made sound disappear. The elevator opened directly into a private office on the 34th floor. Vincent Caruso was standing at the window looking at the city the way people look at things they own, which Mara understood he largely did. He turned when she walked in. He was in a suit that fit the way expensive tailoring was supposed to, and he moved without favoring his left side, which told her the wound had healed properly. Miss Callahan. He gestured to the chairs arranged near the window. Sit down. I'll stand, Mara said. What's this about? Something moved across his expression. Recognition, maybe. She talked to him the same way in the hospital. She talked to everyone the same way in the hospital. I have a proposition, he said. I'm a nurse. I know what you are. He moved to the desk, not sitting behind it, beside it, which she noticed. He picked up a folder and opened it on the desk surface facing her. There were photographs, a name she recognized, her brother's name, Jamie Callahan, and below it figures, a debt ledger, and the name of the man the debt was owed to, which made her stomach drop straight through the floor. Donovan Marsh, Mara said very quietly. He inherited your father's debt when your father died. He has been allowing your brother to make payments. Vincent Caruso's voice was neutral, factual, like reading a weather report. Last week, Marsh sold the debt to a man named Gregor Veld. Veld does not accept payment plans. Mara looked at the folder. She looked at the photographs of Jamie leaving his night shift, head down, unaware. Why are you showing me this? Because you can do something about it. Vincent Caruso closed the folder. And because I need something. He explained it the way she suspected he explained everything. Without ornamentation, without softening. He had a sister, Adelaide, 31. She had been in a private care facility in Rosedale for 8 months following a breakdown that the press hadn't been allowed to know about. She was recovering, genuinely, and she was ready to come home. But she was terrified of the clinical environment and refused to transition with any of the staff the family had arranged. She had fired 4 of them. She's not refusing care, Vincent said. She's refusing people who are afraid of her last name. She needs someone who treats her like a patient, like a person. He looked at Mara. She told her doctor she wanted the nurse who talked back to her brother. Mara stared at him. She knows about that? Adelaide finds it deeply amusing. The corner of his mouth moved. She said, and I'm quoting, "If she can handle Vincent, she can handle me." I have it, I'm aware. The salary for this position is $10,000 a month, plus accommodation in the Rosedale house, fully covered. The duration is flexible until Adelaide is stable and comfortable with a permanent arrangement. Minimum 3 months. He picked up another document. As a signing arrangement, the debt your brother owes Gregor Veld, $48,000 will be cleared. Mara felt the number land in her chest like a stone in still water. $48,000. Jamie's face. The way he looked now, drawn and careful, always calculating whether he could afford the next week. And if Adelaide fires me? Mara asked. She won't. You said 4 people were afraid of her, Vincent said. You're not afraid of anything that bleeds. Mara was quiet for a moment. If your sister decides she doesn't like me for a legitimate reason, I walk, I keep nothing I haven't earned. Agreed, and I need it in writing before I start. He looked at her, the same assessment as the hospital, the same careful attention. Done, he said. Then I'll need 3 days to arrange my schedule. Adelaide Caruso was not what Mara expected, which was itself a lesson she should have already known. Family members of difficult men were never what you expected. She was small and bright-eyed and moved through rooms like she was still deciding whether to trust them. She had her brother's sharpness but wore it differently, pointed inward rather than outward. She had read 3 books in the week before Mara arrived and wanted to talk about all of them. She was funny, unexpectedly, with a dry edge to her humor that appeared without warning and disappeared just as fast. She also had days that were not like that. Days where she sat in the window seat with her knees pulled up and didn't speak, and the silence was a different kind of weight. On those days, Mara didn't push. She made tea. She sat nearby and read or charted. She treated the silence like a patient, something that needed tending without interference. You don't try to fix me on the bad days, Adelaide said about 2 weeks in. You're not broken, Mara said. You're having a bad day. Adelaide looked at her sideways. My last care coordinator said I should try gratitude journaling. I'm sure that's very effective for some people. You don't think so? I think it's a Tuesday, and you're allowed to have a bad Tuesday without writing about why you should be grateful you're having it. Adelaide laughed. It was sudden and genuine and surprised her as much as it surprised Mara. Vincent said you argued with him in the emergency room, Adelaide said. I told him his wound needed proper care. He said you told him he was bleeding onto the gurney, and that was more urgent than his schedule. I was paraphrasing. He liked it. Adelaide said it with the certainty of someone who had known this man her entire life. He doesn't know what to do with people who aren't managing him. The threat arrived on a Wednesday 6 weeks into the arrangement. Mara was coming back from the pharmacy near the Rosedale house when she noticed the car. Dark, idling half a block down, engine running. It had been there when she left. It was still there when she returned 40 minutes later. She didn't run. She walked at the same pace, went inside, and once the door was locked, called the number the guard, whose name she had learned was Roland, had given her for exactly this kind of situation. Roland was there in 12 minutes. He looked at the car, made 1 phone call, and his expression shifted into something careful. That's Veld's people, he said. Mara felt cold move through her in a very specific way. Not panic, something more precise. The debt was supposed to be cleared. It was cleared. The paperwork went through. Roland's jaw something else. Veld has been watching the house for 3 days. We picked up the surveillance yesterday, but we didn't know whose it was. Why would Gregor Veld care about this house? Roland didn't answer immediately, which was itself an answer. Tell me, Mara said. We think someone told him about Adelaide, Roland said carefully. About the recovery. If that information went public, it would hurt the family. It would destabilize a lot of things. Vincent has been managing a land dispute with a consortium that Veld has a stake in. If the Caruso family looks vulnerable. Roland stopped. This isn't your concern, Miss Callahan. We'll handle it. Veld's car is parked outside the house I'm living in where Adelaide is recovering, Mara said. It is absolutely my concern. She didn't sleep that night, not well. She lay in the dark and ran through what she knew. Veld had cleared Jamie's debt. The debt clearance wasn't a threat anymore, which meant Veld was running a different game now. Not using Jamie as leverage over Mara, but using Adelaide as leverage over Vincent. And the question was, how had he known to watch this house? Adelaide's location was private. The staff were vetted. The care facility in Rosedale had tight protocols. The answer arrived in the morning in the form of a document that Roland slid under her door with a note that read simply, "We found the leak." The name on the document was Dr. Philip Hendry, Adelaide's outpatient physician, the one who had been part of every meeting, every transition plan, every care conference. The one who had recommended 4 previous care staff, who had been present at every conversation about Adelaide's timeline and location. Mara sat with the document for a long time. Then she went to find Vincent. He was in the study at the back of the house, on a call that he ended when she walked in. He looked at her face and the call was done before she could say a word. She put the document on the desk. She watched him read it. She watched his expression do the same thing she had seen it do in the hospital. Not anger, exactly. Something colder and more controlled than anger. Something that lived on the other side of anger. "Hendry," he said. "He's been Adelaide's physician for 2 years. He has access to every from him. He would have known about the transition, the location, the schedule, our why, Veld and the consortium. Roland explained it to me. If Adelaide's condition became public during your land dispute." She stopped. "How serious is the dispute?" Serious enough that someone would sell your sister's privacy to destabilize you. Vincent looked up from the document. He looked at her the same way he had the first time, calibrating, measuring. You figured this out last night, he said. I had time. You could have left. Veld's surveillance means you're in range of whatever he's planning. Adelaide is here, Mara said simply. The silence in the room was different from the hospital silence. It had more weight, or maybe she had more weight in it now, after 6 weeks of tea and bad Tuesdays and watching someone find their footing again. Hendry needs to be removed from Adelaide's care, Mara said, immediately, today, and she needs to be told, gently, truthfully, without panic. She can handle the truth. She's been underestimated enough. Vincent looked at her. She'll be upset, Mara continued. About Hendry specifically, because she trusted him. So she needs to hear it from someone who isn't protecting their own position when they tell her. You, he said. She'll take it better from me, and Veld? That's your area, Mara said. I handle Adelaide, you handle Veld. He almost smiled again. She was getting better at reading the almost. You're telling me how to manage my own operation, he said. You were going to sit here and think about Veld until it was too late to catch Hendry before Adelaide's afternoon appointment, Mara said. I'm fixing the order of operations. He stood. He picked up his phone. Roland, he said into it. Cancel Hendry. Block his access. I need a replacement consult by end of day. A pause, and I need eyes on Veld's people. All of them. Move the schedule up. He ended the call and looked at Mara. Go talk to Adelaide, he said. I'll deal with the rest. Adelaide cried. Not the way Mara had expected, not the collapse she'd been bracing for, but quietly, looking out the window with a kind of exhausted betrayal that was harder to watch than any breakdown. I liked him, Adelaide said. He was calm. He never talked to me like I was fragile. You're not fragile. He treated me like I wasn't. That's rarer than it should be. She was quiet for a moment. Is it because of Vincent? Because of people who want to use you to get to Vincent? Yes. Adelaide was quiet for a long time after that. I'm tired, she finally said, of being a liability for him. You're not a liability, Mara said. You're his sister. Those aren't the same thing, even when other people try to make them the same thing. Adelaide looked at her. Do you think he worries about you? Now that Veld knows you're here, Mara thought about the study. The document on the desk, the way he had stood up and made the call. I think, Mara said carefully, that he's handling it. That's not an answer. No, Mara agreed. It isn't. The resolution came on a Thursday, the way most things resolved in Mara's experience. Not cleanly, not dramatically, but with a sudden subtraction of tension, like a pressure in the ear releasing. Roland told her that Gregor Veld had been taken into custody by the RCMP on unrelated charges, financial fraud across 3 provinces, and that the connection to Hendry had been documented and forwarded to the College of Physicians. He said it the way Roland said everything, flatly and without decoration. Mara did not ask how much of the fraud investigation had been accelerated by a phone call from Bay Street. She knew enough. Adelaide heard about Veld on the Friday and said, good, in a tone that was very much her brother's. 3 weeks after that, Adelaide walked into the kitchen at 7 a.m. and announced that she wanted to go to the farmer's market on Roncesvalles, and that she wanted Mara to come, and that she had already looked up what time it opened. They went. Adelaide bought heirloom tomatoes and a jar of honey from a man who kept bees on his apartment balcony, and she talked to 3 strangers about the honey without Mara having to prompt her. And on the walk back, she was pink-cheeked from the cold and talking about what she wanted to plant in the back garden in spring. Mara held the shopping bag and thought, this is what it looks like. Vincent was waiting in the front hall when they got back. He was not supposed to be there. His schedule, which Mara had become as familiar with as his sister's, had him at a meeting downtown until noon. He looked at Adelaide first. The way his expression changed when he saw her, not a small change, was something Mara filed away in the category of things she hadn't expected about him. How was it? He asked Adelaide. The tomatoes are criminal, Adelaide said, already heading upstairs with the honey, in the good way. Mara paid and I didn't argue, which I think shows personal growth. Vincent watched her go up the stairs. He stood there for a moment after she had turned the corner, then he looked at Mara. She's doing well, Mara said. I can see that. She handed him the shopping bag because she wasn't sure what else to do with her hands. He took it and his fingers brushed hers, and neither of them made it into something it wasn't. But neither of them moved immediately, either. I owe you, he said. It didn't sound like a business statement. It's the job, Mara said. You said that in the hospital. It was true then too. He looked at her for a moment. Mara. It was the first time he had used her first name, she noticed. Adelaide asked if you'd stay, he said. Permanently, not as clinical staff. She described it as someone who comes to the farmer's market and doesn't manage me. She's doing well enough that she doesn't need a nurse on site. She knows that. She's not asking for a nurse. Mara looked at him. She thought about the apartment in the annex, the back rent, the supply cart at 11:47 at night, and a night shift that lasted until the light came up grey over the hospital parking lot. She thought about Jamie, who had called her on Sunday to say the debt was gone and he'd slept 8 hours for the first time in a year. She thought about what it had cost her to walk into this house and what it had given her in return, which was not what she had expected when she accepted the envelope. "What are you asking?" she said. Vincent Caruso set the shopping bag down. "I'm asking," he said carefully, "if you would consider staying. Not as an employee. You know I don't know how to be anything other than direct with you." "I'm counting on it," he said. "It's the only thing that's ever corrected me." 6 months later, the Caruso name was in the papers again. Land deal finalized. New development along the waterfront. Partnership with 3 community organizations in the East End. The photograph in the Globe showed Vincent shaking hands with the lead city planner, and if you looked carefully, slightly off to the side, there was a woman in a navy coat who had absolutely not been positioned there by anyone, and who was looking at the camera the way she looked at everything. Like it was going to have to earn her attention. Adelaide saw the photograph and cut it out, the way people used to cut things from newspapers, and taped it to the wall of the study, next to a photograph of the Roncesvalles market, and a pressed flower from the first thing she had planted in the back garden. Mara saw it there one morning and didn't say anything, because some things didn't need correcting. They just needed to be left exactly where they were.